Oh my God, who killed Kennedy? Don't worry, our beloved hostess is still with us. She's just not in studio tonight. Kennedy will be joining us later in the hour to give us an update on exactly what particular type of transmitted disease prevented her from being here. In the meantime, strap yourselves in. It's going to be a hell of a show. We got Greenwald, Nick Gillespie, and for you choke slammers out there, we're going to have the professional wrestler known as Kane, a lover of freedom and small government, it turns out. Let's make Mama proud. This is The Independents. Hey there, I'm Matt Welch, editor-in-chief of Reason magazine, flanked by serial entrepreneur and Murray Rothbard fanboy Camille Foster from Freethink Media. Together, we are The Independents. Tonight, we're joined by a special guest coming to us remote from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, a journalist and commentator who has been busy of late both breaking and making the news. He's Glenn Greenwald, formerly of The Guardian, and now of a new website called The Intercept. Glenn has spent the past year publishing scoops based on the whistleblowing revelations of former NSA employee Edward Snowden. Glenn, welcome to The Independents.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So this past week, like the rest of the month, you've been publishing a series of scoops about how British intelligence have been going online to actively ruin the reputations of people with whom presumably the British government disagrees with. Talk about what you found and what's the importance of it.
These documents were among the ones that I found most shocking pretty early on because they talk about how the British government, and this was in a presentation made to the NSA and 3 other allies, how the British government and its intelligence agency, the GCHQ, does things like false flag operations, as they call them, where they post very incriminating things to the internet and then attribute it falsely to someone whose reputation they're trying to smear, or they notify their friends and family, or they disseminate destructive information about them. They use honey traps, which is the use of sexually appealing women, whether fictionalized or real, to lure their targets into compromising situations. And it's not just the normal spycraft where they're doing it to the leaders of hostile countries or their military or intelligence officials. It's directed at people who are just dissidents, people with the group Anonymous, people they call hacktivists, normal criminal suspects who have been charged with no crime. They infiltrate online communities. They essentially disseminate deception throughout the internet, making the internet really an untrustworthy place to be.
And Glenn, this story really does seem to build on another story that I saw on the Intercept not too long ago related to WikiLeaks and the fact that both the United States government and foreign governments were in the business of turning these people into essentially enemies, foreign enemies that they could then spy and monitor with NSA tools and resources.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that the Obama administration and its apologists love to say in response to the 7 months of or 8 months of NSA reporting that we're doing is, well, there's no evidence of any sort of political targeting like there was in the 60s and 70s, and that's absolutely false. Not only is the news story that I just described an example of that website, which could be journalists, it could be supporters, it could be people to collect very invasive information, including their IP address, which can enable the government to individually identify somebody. So you have groups like WikiLeaks and Anonymous and hacktivists. We published a story a couple months ago about using the porn habits of people that the government deems radicals to try and destroy their reputation. Era when the government targets are never popular. So a lot of people don't like WikiLeaks or hacktivists. Back in the 60s and 70s, people didn't like various civil rights leaders. They didn't like anti-war groups. But the point is, you should not have the government being able to destroy people using covert means. That's why we have due process. The state should only be able to punish people whom they've charged, given a fair trial to, and then convicted.
Glenn, you just won the prestigious George Polk Award for investigative reporting, and they're having their ceremony in April. You talked about, you're coming to us right now from Brazil, obviously, where you live. For very understandable reasons. You talked recently about how you're not really sure what your reception is going to be at the airport. Your many critics on both right and left accuse you of being sort of self-dramatic for some of this. Are you really scared they're going to put you in cuffs when you come to JFK?
Well, I'm coming back, and I'm coming back quickly and shortly, rather. So I guess I'm not that scared. But when the top national security officials in the Obama administration, like James Clapper and Keith Alexander, and then leading members of Congress like Peter King and Mike Rogers go around publicly accusing you of being a criminal for the journalism that you're doing, and advocate that you ought to be arrested, on top of a whole variety of other people who have done that, from Alan Dershowitz to Mark Thiessen and a bunch of other people, of course you'd be an idiot not to take those accusations and those threats seriously. On top of which, we have a lot of lawyers who are saying that given the Obama administration's track record when it comes to press freedoms, there may be less than a 50% chance that something like that would happen, but it's certainly much greater than trivial. And so you want to be aware of the risk, you want to protect yourself to the greatest extent that you can, and then you want to make sure that you don't succumb to them or acquiesce them and let the government unjustly threaten or bully you. And of course I'm going to return to my own country and not be exiled for the crime of doing journalism. But it's definitely a campaign that they're deliberately doing of being threatening and bullying to try and deter future reporting, even though I think they know by now that it's not going to succeed.
Now, Glenn, you've done a tremendous amount of reporting on a number of these leaked documents from Edward Snowden, and I'm not sure if there are other sources, but in either case, there have been a number of startling revelations. But I wonder if you're at all concerned that the American people, for example, or people internationally might sort of think to themselves, oh, this is old hat, not really paying any attention to some of the stories that are coming out because there's so much of the information.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why we've done the reporting strategy that we've done, which is taken our time and spaced out the stories, is to allow people time to digest them. I think the first week, when we published one story after the next for 5 straight days, even people who work on these issues as experts said that they had a hard time processing stories that were coming that quickly. So I think there are a lot of people who at this point have said, you know what, we know that the NSA has the mentality to invade all forms of electronic human communication and don't necessarily follow every detail of every news story. But when we went back in June and got together, the three of us, Laura Poitras, who's my co-reporter on this story, myself, and our source, Edward Snowden, the thing that he was most worried about was that the world would react with apathy for the revelations that he risked his liberty to expose, and the exact opposite has happened. Here we are 8 months later, and all over the world there's a very serious debate about internet freedom and individual privacy and the role of the state and the media. There's reform efforts all over the world. There's an incredibly bipartisan coalition in Congress that is still very focused on reining in the excesses of the NSA. So it may not be that every single story that we publish 8 months later gets exactly the same attention as the ones we were publishing back in June, but the level of interest internationally among ordinary people around the world is unbelievable and far exceeds anything that we thought in our wildest dreams would be possible.
All right, Glenn, stand by. We'll have more with you next. Also coming up, WWE superstar Kane, and then a surprise from our old friend Kennedy. Welcome back to The Independence. We're joined once again by Glenn Greenwald. Hey, Glenn, I don't want to alarm you, but the producers here were telling me that literally they saw in the background while you were talking black helicopters flying around here. I wanted to ask you a question. I'm not making it up. You have been a very trenchant critic of kind of D.C. Beltway journalism and how it sort of sucks up to power and distorts the view from which a lot of our political and national security reporting is done. Isn't it possible that your view and the view of First Look Media, which you're starting up, has kind of the inverse effect, where you're so far outside, you are literally outside the country, that you have a distorted view of America, that you see things through, you know, the prism of America's sins, and you might exaggerate the influence or power of America in your reporting?
I don't think so. I mean, I grew up in the United States. I'm an American citizen. I lived exclusively in America for 38 years. I go back there continuously. My friends and family are there. The reporters with whom I work on all of these stories are all American citizens who live in the United States. You know, I think that people who go into journalism ought to have a adversarial view of the political officials that they cover. One of the problems with our current media is that they are too eager to curry favor with those in power, not to investigate their statements, but just to mindlessly amplify them, to serve their interest rather than being a check on them. And I think that when you are adversarial to political officials as a citizen, let alone as a journalist, you're not being anti-American, you're actually fulfilling the purpose of the Bill of Rights, of the First Amendment, which says that you should assemble against your government, you should speak out against it, and you should engage in a free press. And to me, it's the most the purest expression of pro-American values to provide that adversarial check on those in power. That's what our democracy requires.
Some of the more humorous criticisms of you that have come specifically on the left from places like the New Republic are that you are known to consort now and again with libertarians. Since we have a pretty libertarian audience for this television show, I want to put it to you, are you now or have you ever been a libertarian, Glenn Greenwald? And what is your relationship with libertarianism writ large?
It's an appropriate way to ask that question, given that that kind of guilt by association is exactly what some people, I wouldn't really call them on the left. I think they're just mostly Democratic partisans. They don't really have an ideology besides allegiance to Democratic politicians, but that's the kind of tactic they engage in. I spoke once at the Cato Institute, or several times at the Cato Institute. I did work with libertarians. I formed coalitions with some of them, and therefore, sort of like a virus, I become infected by that ideology, I think the theory goes. And, you know, for me, what is really interesting is that there are a lot of issues on which libertarians and liberals actually agree. I mean, Alan Grayson worked with Ron Paul to get the Fed audited. Dennis Kucinich worked with Ron Paul. Ron Wyden works with Rand Paul to curb the NSA and civil liberties abuses. And I think it's really important to build those coalitions and not to try and limit yourself and divide ourselves into these artificial red versus blue cheerleading squads. So I don't really care about what labels get applied to me. I just sort of express the things that I have to say, give the evidence for it, and let people decide what labels are appropriate.
And Glenn, at this point, you find yourself in an extraordinarily powerful position in a lot of important respects. You have a lot of classified information that you have some access to through some people. Are you at all concerned about the notion that a single person or a single group of people are responsible for whether or not Americans are able to learn certain sorts of information?
Meaning you.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, sure, it's a heavy responsibility, and it's one that I take very seriously. But I would say two things about it. Number one is that I think there's nothing unique about it. This is what journalism is about all the time. Newspapers get specific classified information or other sensitive information from their source. Nobody else has it, and internally among editors and reporters who get it, they have to make decisions about what ought to be disclosed and what shouldn't be. You know, that's just what journalism is. There's nothing unique about that other than the fact that we happen to have a huge amount of it. But the second thing about it is I've never made a single decision myself about what will or won't get published. I've worked on purpose within the framework of large media institutions with journalists I respect who have lots of experience, national security experience, doing this kind of reporting, with editors, with lawyers. We consult with a huge number of people, with experts. We listen to what the government has to say. We usually disregard it because it's so unpersuasive and vague and manipulative, but we do give them the opportunity to have input as well. And so there's a huge number of people whose views go into the decision-making process. I'm not the only person with these documents, and the decisions that I make are always the byproduct of lots of collaboration.
All right, Glenn, thank you very much. Come see us if you get through security at JFK. Coming up next, Vice President Biden is busy embarrassing himself on national television, first making dubious claims about Obamacare, then talking as if he has a prayer in 2016. We'll chew that over next. Then later, Prince of Darkness Nick Gillespie drops by. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Independents. Our hostess, Kennedy, will join us a little later, but for now, Camille and I are holding down the fort. Also with us is our party panel, making her maiden voyage on the good ship Independence, is beloved Fox business correspondent and world champion shoe owner, Dagen McDowell.
Have you been in my office? You creep. Creeping up my shoes, you pervert.
Also with us, is back for return engagement, is known comedian Tom Shillue. Welcome. Both of you.
I am known.
That's true.
And barbershop quartet.
Yeah, and I have a shoe thing, too.
And you're in that commercial that one time. Booking dot. Yeah.
So, Vice President Joe Biden is at it again. Speaking to the ladies of The View about Obamacare, he made an interesting claim that caught our attention.
How many of you are single women with children in a dead-end job? You're there because of your health insurance. Now, you'll be able to make an independent choice.
Joe Biden apparently has a very high opinion of the viewers of The View. Dagen, what do you make of our vice president's statesmanship
Is he really telling women to go out and quit their jobs and be supported by whom? If they're single and they have children at home, so he's telling them, don't worry about your income. We've got you covered in terms of your health insurance. That seems to be what he's saying.
And also, I don't like, you don't like your job, obviously.
But and you see that they're trying to spin the health care law any which way that they can that is going to somehow create freedom for people. But it creates in some ways, and he kind of pinpoints this, the incentive to not work or to work less, which is what we saw with those Congressional Budget Office numbers, the 2 million plus people who will work less or maybe stop working altogether. But I'm not going to keep talking, but it does raise an issue about the entire nature of the healthcare system in this country, and it's still employer-based, so they basically made a bad system worse.
Yeah,
you're nodding a lot and saying that's
well,
right.
yes, I am. And it's so strange to watch the administration and Democrats who support both raising the minimum wage and the healthcare reform in general, spinning as fast as they can, trying to find new rationales and justifications for job loss. Job loss is wonderful. It's exceptional. It's going to allow people to spend more time with their families. It'll allow women who, of course, have dead-end jobs to spend more time with their kids, because that is the only reason they work, is so they can have health care.
But is
which
it
sounds
actually
ridiculous and outrageous. Can I say one more thing? All of the references to single women keep making me think that someone is going to break into song, talking about put a ring on it or something like that. All the single ladies, if you like it, put a ring on it.
Tom Shillue, is this is Biden onto something, actually? Are we, we have this weird system where our job is tethered to our health insurance. It shouldn't be like that. It is like that. Wouldn't that naturally create an incentive to people to have crappy jobs that they don't want?
Or wouldn't it naturally create an incentive for us to have some private health insurance that you can buy and sell and take to another state? Freedom, that's freedom. He says, oh, this is all about freedom. Freedom what? To tether yourself to this government healthcare system? The goal of saying this is about freedom, it's unbelievable that someone can say that on a television program, and then the four hosts just kind of nod their heads. I mean,
that is exactly what they were doing, too.
It's unbelievable.
Well, speaking of Joe Biden on television programs, also on The View this week, the vice president was asked a somewhat condescending, if 100% justified question about 2016.
If Hillary does not run, will you have said that if she runs for president, you will not run her?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
no,
then
no.
tell me what you
Look,
said.
No, I absolutely have not said no. It's as likely I run as I don't run. I just truly haven't made up my mind.
Obviously being treated with the respect he richly deserves. Are we all ready for President Biden in 2016?
President Biden? Really? We gotta hope he runs, right? Because he will put his foot in his mouth so often. We'll have so much to talk about. It'd be interesting to see, but based on all the, there was that recent CBS poll, it looks like people really, at least when asked, they prefer Hillary too.
I am so ready for President Biden, so ready for him to run.
Is
and
this
I will
your
tell you,
sarcasm
I will
again?
tell you, no, this isn't sarcasm. This is totally serious. I don't like his president who people perceive as too smart, inspires too much confidence in government, and makes them believe in all sorts of ambitious plans. Better that you are constantly second-guessing the guy who is always saying really ridiculous, nonsensical stuff, so you can laugh at them and say, oh my God, seriously,
you
can
would
you
have
believe this
supported-
guy? That is what concerned me most about Barack Obama. Not that he's a socialist or a secret Muslim, and perhaps he's all of those things. But, I'm joking. No, sarcasm. Play well. But people believed he was a brilliant Rhodes Scholar who could do just about anything, like pass a massive, brand new entitlement like the healthcare reform bill, and, well, not quite an entitlement, but at any rate, a massive reform effort, and that it would all work wonderfully. And that is obviously not the case.
So you are advocating for stupid candidates for president, just to be
Yes,
clear.
yes. I'll constantly provide my endorsement to them, and until someone sillier and more ridiculous comes along, I am endorsing Joe Biden right now.
Right, at least people who embarrass themselves frequently.
He could be president. He could be. He just has to go Francis Underwood on Hillary.
Which he could totally do. I could believe that.
He needs some subversive action, And maybe that's his plan. That's what he says. He's not going to announce, but if he sees that Hillary's going to crash, then he's just going to be able to step in, and maybe he can help accelerate that process.
And that's not a spoiler, right, Tom? I mean,
No, it's.
No,
I mean,
it actually is. He just gave the entire second season of
come on.
House of Cards away.
I think we all knew what was going to be happening on House of Cards.
No, I talked about the three-way, and that got me into trouble.
I think we all knew where that was going as well.
Quickly,
There were two three-ways,
Dagen
actually, one with a bag and one without.
Oh, my gosh.
Dagen mentioned the CBS poll that just came out showing that Rand Paul and Jeb Bush are up in the Republican imagination, and Chris Christie's kind of looking down. What's your quick take on where the Republican Party is right now? Dagen.
Rand Paul has mojo. He's reaching out in small ways to people who might not be so far right, that might be independent or have varying views, and he's got major money-raising potential, and he's not a governor, which the Republican elite don't really like.
All right. And panel, stay right there. We'll have more with you coming up. But next, two small government champions, one who you know well, Nick Gillespie, and then a special surprise, WWE superstar Kane. Stay with us.
Hey, wait, TJ Cowboys hang around, sleeping in the sidewalk with a Burger King crown. Never wake them up. Massive visit to the Rooster Crows.
Budget, but we're not going to tell you how we're going to pay for it yet. And it's, you know, the budget proposal from the president and then later from the House Republicans and hopefully eventually by the Senate Democrats, they're about 1 for 5 over the past few years. So who knows if they'll deliver one, but they'll be coming out in more detail over the next couple of weeks. But essentially what we're hearing from the White House is the minute the budget deficit goes down below $1 trillion, it's time to start spending again because we finally have tamed the deficit as a political issue. And that's even how the Washington Post put it. So we're locked into this bizarre moment where because, you know, we've had budget deficits recently as high as $1.4 trillion. Now that we're looking at one that's only about $500 billion or so, you know, then we can start spending again because we don't need austerity anymore. And that seems to be the message of Obama's budget. Kind of strange, to say the least.
$500 billion deficits were, of course, unconscionable during the Bush administration. And And Barack Obama came to office in 2009 and gave an interview with the Washington Post just before inauguration saying, you know, we have to fix entitlements on my watch. We're going to do this one. And went so far in the debt ceiling deal to create an entitlement commission. Are entitlements just dead as a political or policy issue in this country right now?
Well, let's put it this way. As far as the Republicans and Democrats go, they're not going to take a long look or a hard look at entitlements. And by this, I mean especially Social Security and Medicare until sometime after 2016. And you got to figure these guys are both hoping that that the world doesn't exist in 2016 because they're just kicking the can. So, you know, you talk about road building and whatnot. The only reason that anybody is building any roads these days is so that they can kick the can further down it. Obama is punting, you know, on entitlements. The Republicans are just as bad, if not worse. And this is the real problem because entitlement spending is going to grow. Just on Social Security, Medicare, and Obamacare related things, we're looking at an increase of, you know, from about 9% of GDP to about 15% of GDP over the next 20 years. These are massive amounts of money. These are bad programs that are not serving the public till, and they're also not serving the public very well. So, yeah, it's dead. It's dead to politicians. It's very much alive to us and to the, you know, to future generations.
And we can zoom out a little bit, Nick, and I am going to forgive you for taking a swipe at me and my wardrobe on Twitter the other day. We don't need to discuss that. I do like your bold choice today, though, all black.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it, so let's not.
That's fine. That's fine. But if we zoom out a little bit, we look at sort of Democrats and Republicans. They're both backing away from any sort of serious issues. I mean, you hinted at it a little bit, but the debt and deficit do not seem to be things that are translating particularly well for Republicans, so they just aren't going to talk about it anymore. And Democrats, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Matt has talked a lot about this, and I think he's right. You know, Mitt Romney ran for president on the grounds that he was the fiscal conservative and he was fiscally responsible, but he would not mention any dime of spending that he would cut other than something like the NEA or PBS funding. The Republicans just are not serious. The last time they ran the government under Bush, when they had both houses of Congress and the White House, they increased spending by 50% in real dollars. They don't have a lot of credibility on this issue, and they ran against Obamacare by saying, oh, he's going to pay for Obamacare by cutting Medicare. What we now have, and this is not to demonize the Republicans alone, I mean, basically now what we have is Obamacare plus promises to keep spending more and more on Medicare. This is a real and serious issue, and unfortunately, it looks like the only time it's going to be addressed by Washington is either when voters really start holding people's feet to the fire, or they go to the piggy bank and it's totally broke.
Is this just another reason to miss Bill Clinton, Nick? I mean, under Clinton, we had pretty much flat spending. We've actually had flat spending the last several years here, but after a gigantic leap in Bush's last year and Obama's first year, and we sort of we swallowed the python swallowed the pig, but then we kept the same size snake, and I think that's the best metaphor anyone's come up with.
Bill Clinton or divided government, which we may very well find ourselves with that situation again pretty soon.
That may be the best thing to hope for, although interestingly, Bill Clinton increased spending less when he had a Democratic Congress than he did as a percentage than he did when he had a Republican Congress. So, you know, think about that. And also second-termers tend to spend more, whether it's Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan or, you know, just about anybody. George Bush is actually kind of odd in that, the rate of increase decelerated in his second term. But, you know, this is the issue. The entitlement spending, particularly old age entitlements, Medicare and Social Security, they were built for a very different world, and they were addressing a different set of concerns that were born out of the Great Depression. We no longer have the workforce, you know, demographically, where we have a lot of people who can pay into a system to help relatively few people who are poor. That's what Social Security, that's what Medicare did. It's the reverse now, where we have a lot of older people who are actually well off, and we're trying to increasingly tax young people. There are fewer of them, and they make less money. So the pyramid is really inverted. And if we don't get a hold of this, every economist, you know, whether you're talking about Milton Friedman or Paul Krugman, will tell you that massive persistent deficit spending that leads to massive and mounting debt, national debt, decreases over time. It's not good for economic growth, and economic growth is the way that people increase their standard of living. We are already at, you know, over 100% debt in this country when you look at intra-government debt as well as debt held by the public.
All right, Nick, we have to cut you off there. Sorry about that, but thanks for cheering us up. I appreciate it, as always. All right, coming up next, WWE superstar Kane. No, he's not just a badass wrestler. He's also a passionate champion of small government. How the hell did that happen? We'll find out next. Welcome back to The Independents. Our next guest can kill you with his body and his mind. Glenn Jacobs is a professional wrestler with World Wrestling Entertainment, better known by his ring name, Kane. When he's not chair-smashing jobbers, he's talking to people like us about the benefits of small government. Glenn, welcome to The Independents.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, how did you get interested in libertarian ideas?
Well, I think like everyone, I grew up thinking that there was only two alternatives. You had the left and the right. And while I agreed with both sides on certain issues, I disagreed on other issues. So I felt like I was always being pigeonholed. Was I a liberal? Was I conservative? Was I a Democrat? Was I a Republican? Until just by chance I discovered the term libertarian, and it sort of opened my eyes up to the idea that you know, there are things that I can agree with from both sides, perhaps the civil libertarian issues of the left and also the economic freedom issues of the right, while still rejecting the big government tendencies of both sides of the political spectrum. And you know, what the great thing about libertarianism is it really is the American dream. It's the ability of everybody to live their life, to build their life according to what they want, so long as you don't hurt anybody else.
Softball question that I believe I know the answer to, Glenn. Is there any writer, libertarian author, that has particularly inspired you?
Oh, there have been many. You know, Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard, just a number of people that have influenced me. Mary Ruart, Harry Brown, who ran for president as a libertarian a couple times. So there have been a number of people.
You've been spoken in connection with possible political runs. Are you interested in seeking higher office at any point, or even low office?
Right. Well, Never say never, right? But at this point, no. You know, the political realm is an animal unto itself, and as tough as I am, it takes a really tough person to get in there and to fight for that. But nevertheless, maybe at some point in time, that's something I'd be interested in pursuing, but not currently.
All right, Glenn, this is the time where I geek out and admit the fact that I watched wrestling for many, many, many years and still occasionally do.
You should still be watching
got into it in college, and I've got to tell you, my favorite wrestling memory is you unmasking. It's that fight with Triple H and Nature Boy Ric Flair. He goes for the pedigree, you break out of the pedigree, all of the tension is building. What is your favorite wrestling memory?
My favorite was my first WrestleMania match with Undertaker in Madison Square Garden at WrestleMania 14. And then another highlight was when I won the WWE Championship from Stone Cold Steve Austin at the King of the Ring pay-per-view in 1998.
That's fantastic.
What are the big misconceptions about wrestling out there? Are there still any misconceptions left?
Yeah, I still think that people, think that maybe in some ways we're, as a group, not the most intelligent bunch of people. Most of us do have college degrees. Most of us played college sports and other things like that. So, there are those stereotypes die hard. WWE is working hard to break those stereotypes, as I am myself by doing stuff like this.
Are there other people, other wrestlers out there who've been interested in some of your Murray Rothbard talks?
Well, sure. The thing about it is we're independent contractors. We pay our own taxes. And when you have to write a check out to the IRS every 3 months, certainly you find a religion very quickly. And I think libertarianism does, libertarianism does appeal to most people because that's how we lead our lives until the state gets involved, of course. We lead our lives in voluntary interactions with other folks, and we follow what libertarians would call the non-aggression axiom, which means you're not supposed to initiate force against someone else except, of course, in defense of your own liberty or property. So that's something that's the golden rule, and that's something that we can all relate to.
All right, Glenn Jacobs, thank you so much for coming up on The Independents. So, whatever happened to Kennedy? First, everybody knows the country is broke, but did you hear the president just unveiled a $300 billion spending project? That's billion with a B. B. Almost half the size of the stimulus. Stay tuned.
The money don't stand there and shiver. Tax time is coming. Give alms to the poor, or I'll put a bullet right through your...
Welcome back to The Independents. In 2008, Barack Obama described our $9 trillion debt accurately as irresponsible and unpatriotic. Now, under his careful fiscal stewardship, the debt stands at $17 trillion. Basically the same amount of money the economy produces in an entire year. So, what's President Patriotic doing about it? Well, today he unveiled a proposal to spend $300 billion on federal transportation projects. Yes, that's billion with a B. Hooray! Austerity is over. Our panel is back. Dagen and Tom. Tom, you're a transportation expert. What do you think about the quality of these projects?
Living in New York, I am a transportation expert because I drive, I take the train, I take buses, I'm all over everything. The thing that gets me about this is that they said they always say these bills are paid for. They said this one was paid for out of the corporate tax rejiggering or whatever it was. They're going to redo
whatever that won't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And why do we keep up this fantasy that these things are paid for? Whenever they say this bill is going to be paid for with this, and nothing is paid for ever. It's fake. They just move numbers around on a ledger. Nothing's paid for.
Well, let's talk about paid for, Dagen.
This makes me so mad.
Why are we paying for transportation from the federal government?
Why are you trying to reform corporate taxes and then pay for what essentially the gas tax is supposed to pay for? A tax. You talk about this and people lose their minds when you talk about raising the gas tax. Hasn't gone up in about 20 years, right? It's not covering our infrastructure needs. It's not funding. The General Revenue Fund is helping fill the gap in terms of fixing our roads. So we don't raise that, so we're going to reform corporate taxes and then pay for it. It is utterly ridiculous that the people using our roads aren't paying for them.
Tolls, that's what I want. Why don't we have tolls? We have them everywhere around the Northeast. When I go across the country, I can't believe it. Nobody has tolls. Slap a toll on every road.
You know who's not paying? People driving
you would like
electric
that?
cars.
Yes.
People driving electric cars are not paying to use the roads.
This is kind of the problem they're trying to face, right? Or trying to shut down. But part of it is that 30 cents or so on every transportation dollar is going to mass transit. On the gas tax. So we're taking the gas tax, which is supposed to pave the roads, which have done so well in New York, as you know, from commuting.
Well, this isn't unlike the stimulus. I mean, the stimulus was supposed to have all of this wonderful money allocated for infrastructure spending. We were going to work on bridges and roads, and almost none of that money ended up going into those projects. This is a massive increase over previous years' allocations. I mean, we're talking almost $300 billion over the course of 4 years. I can only imagine the sort of waste that's going to take place, the sort of political cronyism that's going to happen as they're handing out these grants. That is one of the many myriad problems associated with
I want to
this.
know what happened to the stimulus. The stimulus package itself had something like $300 billion spent on infrastructure. It was going to be the biggest infrastructure spending project since Eisenhower built the interstate freeways. Where's our Golden Gate Bridge?
Well, the lack of any of this construction is stimulating the economy because there's so many holes in the road that it is stimulating auto body and tire repair shops all over the Northeast.
Well, particularly New York, mostly because of the weather, and I hate driving in New York.
But also, yeah, go on.
But I was just going to say, there is not a politician on the right or left, middle, up or down that will stand up for raising the gas tax in this country. Instead, they try and tinker with it in all these ridiculous ways, and nobody will do anything about it.
There's a simple fix to this. Robert Poole at the Reason Foundation, which publishes my magazine, talks about this constantly. Let private finance build new highways.
Absolutely.
It's really not that hard. They want to spend the money. There's billions of dollars in these transportation funds in New Zealand and all over the place. They want to build these things. They started to build them around the Beltway. There's one, I think, in the Highway 91 in California, these toll lanes. They want to build these things if they can charge money for them and go to private people instead of the damned Port Authority. Why can't we just let that happen?
This is
Tom can get his tolls.
This transportation bill.
For-profit tunnels and bridges. I'm all for that.
This transportation bill. This is a one-time fix. It's not a long-term solution to paying for the upkeep of our roads. And the gas tax is a declining source of revenue because we're driving. Our cars are so much more fuel efficient.
I just can't believe that we're living through this era of post-austerity. Who knew that we had been tightening our belts so well for so long? All right, Tom and Dagen, thank you so much for coming on The Independents. Next, our fellow independent Kennedy is here to explain her shocking absence. But due to direct orders by the authorities, she's only able to join us by phone. She'll explain in her own soothing voice next. Welcome back to The Independents. As we've been telling you all hour, Camille and I are like two legs of a stool tonight because Kennedy pulled a Bob Costas on us. Due to her unspeakably horrid condition, she can only join us by phone. Kennedy, what happened?
What happened? I got pink eye. It sucks. It totally sucks. I'm disfigured. It's awful.
The close viewers could notice that maybe it was starting to swell up on you last night. What is pink eye? It sounds terrible.
It's conjunctivitis. It's an inflammation of the kind of sheath around the eyeball, the white of the eye, and also the inner part of the eyelid. And it's either bacterial or it's viral. And if it's bacterial, it goes away within a couple days. And if it's viral, then you work with Bob Costas for 6 weeks.
But this is obviously a much more aggressive strain of pink eye than Bob Costas had because he actually came to work when he had pink eye and you're not here. So we should play up the fact that this is so aggressive that you can barely walk. That's true, right?
Well, I did take a nap when I got back from
I think Anthony Weiner is going to be talking smack about you next time he comes on set.
I've not gone outside because I don't want to scare children. Like, it's so bad. I fear people's pity.
Well, we have a graphic of you wearing sunglasses right now. I mean, is that not sufficient to protect the children?
I don't think the sunglasses would do it. I think if they got a peek on the inside, it would be they'd curdle up. It would be sad. I don't know what would happen to their innards. It's for the children, you guys.
I do have to tell you that Matt has been playing with your pens. He won't stop playing with them. He took them all out of your office. He's pressing them. He's gone mad with power. He's doing anything he wants. He won't listen to anyone. They're calling things on the headset. He just disregards it and does whatever he wants. He even interviewed Glenn Greenwald. I told him I'd tell you, and I did.
Camille's just bent out of
I hope
shape.
he's not touching my pen.
No, it's gone beyond the pen touching face.
It's cool. He'll have conjunctivitis soon. He'll get what he deserves.
Camille's just bent out of shape because we interviewed famed WWE wrestler Kane, and I apparently stepped on Camille's question to start some kind of death cage match with him? Chair
I just want to be his tag team partner. I think that would work really well for the show and for his career and mine as a professional wrestler.
And for your shared political ideology. I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Yeah.
No,
See?
it's not a bad idea.
Going to work on that.
What is the prognosis? What kind of battery acid are you dropping in your eye? And can you reassure everybody that you will be on the Friday Oscar show?
I will be on the Friday Oscar show. Yeah, no, I'm very confident. I've been following doctor's orders. Warm compresses. Do not put cold compresses on your eyes, no matter how uncomfortable they are. I have to do a Cipro drop 4 times a day, and just lay low, stay out of the light. Carol Ann.
Okay. Well, we miss you, Kennedy, and we will see you back here soon.
I miss you guys too. I'm so sad.
Bye-bye.
I would cry if I could get my eye to open.
All right. Thanks for being with us tonight. Don't forget, the man, the legend, Stossel is in this time slot tomorrow night. Then Friday, as mentioned, we're back with a new show called The Grouchy Oscars, where we pick our best and worst movies of the year, make Oscar predictions, and talk about Hollywood handouts and wear some of the best black tie this side of a valet parking garage. It's going to be a hoot. Until then, for the ailing Kennedy and Camille Foster, I am Matt Welch. Good night.